Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of The Network Effect. Thank you so much for all of you that are joining us for our second episode. We just wanted to kick off today by firstly thanking everybody who joined us on our first episode. I think between LinkedIn Live, YouTube, and the podcast, we hit just over 1,000 views for our first episode. So, congratulations to all the team. I think it's a great start, and we're excited to be back here this week and to really sort of kick things off properly. With our full format. Obviously, last week we ran you through a little bit of the vision for the show and so forth. But yeah, we're excited to get into it this week. We just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who joined in the chat, and please do that again. We had some fantastic people from all over the world. A little bit of a shout out just to a handful of them because I can't mention everyone, but I know we had Rosie from the UK in the chat last week. I saw Daniel from Mexico. Christelle actually gave us some amazing feedback last week as well. She managed to connect with 3 people through the conversation happening on the Network Effect and is having some conversations with them. So a bit of a shout out to her and a small little shout out to Ahmed as well, who sent us all individual voice notes after last week's episode congratulating us. So we really appreciate all the positive feedback and everything. We have a really exciting show coming up for you guys this week as well. We have an amazing guest, which I'll let Asma introduce in a moment. But just to also let you know, hopefully you'll see some new backgrounds and so forth this week. We're trying to iterate and obviously make things better where we can. So let us know what you think. Let us know if you have any great ideas. After today's interview, we'll also have our new regular section, which will be Zain, Siraj and I jumping into some global business topics and a bit of news and so forth. So we're going to dive into global branding and sponsorships, and I'm sure you can guess where that's sort of going with what's going on in the news at the moment. So I guess, Asma, we're going to hand over to you for the interview to kick things off today. What are you guys covering?
Great. No, thank you so much, Ben, and lovely to be here again for the second episode. I'm equally excited today because we've got an amazing guest. He's a VC from the UAE all the way in Dubai, joining us online shortly. He is the founding partner of this VC that was actually established not that long ago, 2016. So he's going to tell us about his journey, about investments, types of companies they invest in, and so forth. So without further ado, let's introduce Shane Shin.
Sounds great.
Great, thank you. So basically, before we bring Shane on screen, I just wanted to do some justice to introducing him as a young investor. So he's a young Forbes 30 under 30 investor, founded his fund. It's a great accolade to have, having won this award. But actually, it made me think, with this achievement that he has, that investors are getting younger and younger these days. And it made me wonder whether actually I now need to retire. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, actually, I'm not quite ready for the grey army just yet. So I'm going to bring Shane on screen now. So please welcome Shane Shin from Shorooq Partners. Hi, Shane. Lovely to see you.
Hello, Asma. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. And thank you so much for joining all the way from Dubai. Right. So, Shane, I'm going to kick off. Really excited to have you here, and I think so many people were looking forward to listening to your journey and what you've achieved so far. And it's an interesting one because, as I said, investors are getting younger and younger these days. And no matter where I go, and I thought it's really good to kind of set the scene in context of really how investment works, particularly. I mean, years ago when I started my business, and started working and so forth, it was very different. But now, having exited a business, become an investor myself, I actually come across so many different types of investors, whether it's private equity, whether it's private individuals, whether it's VC funds, whether it's corporate finance, whatever it is. But the wealthier a fund, the wealthier an individual, the more they are a billionaire or a trillionaire, the more money they need. Can you please shed some light on that?
So first of all, no, thank you for the amazing intro. By looking at the photos, I realized, wow, I looked pretty good just a few years ago. Right? But having my own fun and now having running Shorooq for the last 4 years and a half, you really become more mature. Right? So Asma, I can tell you that when we first started Shorooq, like any other startup founders, I didn't know exactly what I was doing. You have a thesis, and you have a conviction and the confidence that you can do better than others. But I think with a lot of hustle and discipline, you really learn and refine your thoughts, refine how you differentiate from other funds or from other investors. And we really have been, I personally have been growing both personally and professionally, and it has been the most humbling journey, right? So like I'm here to talk about any questions you have and really just share more thoughts.
Wonderful. So Shane, one of the questions I do have, obviously, I'd say you're very young, so a lot of experience that to be gained in the future, and so there's a long journey ahead. Managing funds is not an easy task in itself. So that's one thing. And on the other side, when you're investing in companies, that's a huge responsibility, to ensure your term sheets are on target, people are growing, companies are delivering, and then you're getting your returns as well. So tell me, if you obviously originally from South Korea, correct me if I'm
Yes.
wrong, and you moved to the US to study there, you became an investment banker. So talk us through, how did you end up creating a fund?
So I think the first story I need to say is why Middle East, and then I'll talk about the
Yeah.
fund. So similar to a lot of us, I had a lot of passion for emerging market, and I felt that the Middle East back in 2015 and pre was really wakening up, and that thesis, the fundamental thesis, has been true. If you follow the Saudi, UAE, Bahrain, Jordan, Egypt, Pakistan, so many things are happening on the ground, and I've been so blessed. I know I'm not the smartest guy in the world, and I always wanted to be a bit early because when the economy and the whole region wakes up, I can also be uplifted along with others in that ecosystem. Now, I felt that having my own fund as an investor, although like when I was, so I founded Shorooq when I was 26, along with my partner who was slightly older than me, and like we needed that trust and we needed to have the track record but also our own clearly defined thesis to raise that fund. So we started extremely tiny, but our first investments like Pure Harvest, which is now the leading agri-tech in the whole region, they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and now we produce about 100 tons of tomatoes a week locally produced in the Middle East. We led the seed round of Sarwa, which is now the leading robo advisor platform, one of the most respected fintech companies in the whole Middle East. And we led that round back in 2017, and we led their pre-Series A, and now we're just closing a Series B, and you're going to hear the announcement. Really credible investors globally are leading their Series B. So we had that conviction that we can lead the best companies in the Middle East, and this is the fund was just the a physical form of how we did that, and we have been making a lot of good successful investments so far. Now we have more than 30 companies, and we have made more than 65 investments across those 30 companies across the whole Middle East, North Africa, and Pakistan. So it has been quite a humbling journey so far.
Fantastic. So just going back to that then, so you were a startup yourself. As you said, you started this when you were 26 years, a tender age of 26, right? So very early. And without that experience behind you, and when you are going to people, obviously to get investments into a fund, it's a huge task in itself. And like any startup, when you start a business, there are so many challenges along the way. So you've obviously experienced the pains of trying to start this fund up yourself, convincing people, bringing people on board, selling as much as you possibly can. So, what were the challenges you experienced? I mean, obviously, you can
Yeah,
relate to the startups you actually
yeah,
invest in,
yeah.
and so what did you experience? What were the issues
So
that came up?
So I actually joke with the founders that the raising capital for the fund is as challenging, if not more challenging, than raising capital for a startup because startup you actually have a kind of clear idea of what's the product you want to make, what's the service you're going to offer, who are your clients, what are your competitors, and how you're going to differentiate from those competitors so that investors can have a more clear idea on what we're backing. Now, in a fund, we can have a pitch deck on what is our thesis, what is our strategy, what is the profile of the companies we want to back, but we do not know when and how I'm going to find them, or we do not know if those companies even exist. So, like, definitely, Asma, it has been extremely challenging. I'll tell you how we thought about the fundraising journey. I believe that capital, in a grand scheme of things, will be a commodity and should be a commodity. The idea, the execution, the differentiation should really be your IP. So we focus a lot more on how can I find the company? How can I convince that founder to take my capital versus others? And securing that allocation, securing that the lead position or investor position, then I can bring the capital. So definitely it's a risky move, and sometimes it does not work well because you need to really find a good company. And alhamdulillah, we have been blessed to find good companies. I told you about Sarwa and Pure Harvest. One of our first investments were Trucker. They have raised like so much capital. They are the leading mobile platform in the whole region. They're the like Uber for trucks, right? And they are the leading player in the Middle East, in the MENA region, and we're one of the early investors on that. And I can tell you that back then we didn't have too much capital. So once we underwrote that thesis, we're also raising capital at the same time, right? But now we don't have to do that anymore because people entrust us with their capital. So to tell you my response on why is it so difficult to raise a fund, to build that trust, but also to find the right deal flow, right? To find the right deal flow, which is quite challenging. Now we see 2,000 companies a year, and we invest in about 12. But like back then, I was really just focusing on finding the right companies.
So, how do you know if a company is the right company? Because again, when you're a VC, I mean, I guess any investor, if you know, if anybody or a startup knows that you're a target that we can go to get funds, you're inundated, thousands and thousands, literally, of applications that inflood your inbox. So how do you then differentiate? How do you know who to select? And there are, and quite often, what I get from a lot of companies who come to you with investment is, right, we've got an investment. This is great. We've got about 5 people on board. We're closing in 10 days. If you don't close by then, you've missed out on this opportunity. It's almost like they're selling to you and they're saying, if you don't come on board, you've missed out. So how do you tackle that?
So, I mean, as you know, like it's never good to be FOMO'd out, right? So we try our best to avoid the FOMO situation. Uh, there are many ways to answer this. I'll tell you how one facet on what we do at Shorooq. We do something called thesis-driven sourcing. So we call it TDS internally, and we have our own thoughts on what is the right sector to back and how I'm gonna find that before others and why it is the right time. For example, since 2019, we have really started to focus a lot more on infrastructure level investments. So before 2019, a lot of our investments were more focused on B2C. Like Sarwa, the leading robo advisor on B2C, SmartCrowd, the leading real estate crowdfunding platform in fintech, but it's a B2C. Like an e-commerce marketplace platform are focused on B2C. But around 2019, we started to believe that now our ecosystem is ready, regulators are getting ready, tech engineers are getting ready on more deep down infrastructure level startups, be that fintech, healthcare tech, platform. So we started to back companies like Lean, which is the leading open banking platform, Nimcard. They enable fintechs and mobile wallets to issue a virtual card. So they're not on the front end B2C, but they serve all the uprise of fintech companies that are popping up every week, and I wanted to serve them. So we really went deep onto that B2B infrastructure thesis, and we have been doing a very good job on that. So that's just one element. I will tell you that this year we met with more than 120 gaming companies. We had a huge thesis on gaming since last year. So we have been behind the curtain. We have been reaching out to hundreds and talking to many players, not only the region. My friends at EA, I talked to them to get their thesis, talk to globally, and we solidify our own thoughts, adapt to the region, and we have a view that what are the type of companies I should look at. For example, in gaming side, there is a developer side, studio, there's a publisher, there is a esports, there's a physical tournament. So there's a lot of different facets and elements within the gaming, and we believe publisher was one of the best ways to let's say, enjoy our thesis on the gaming side. So we have talked to many, and we have not closed an investment yet, but we certainly became smarter by finding and talking to 120 gaming companies. So this is one of the thought process we do. We obviously receive a lot of inbound deals, be it cold email, LinkedIn, warm referrals from the founders, other VCs, and as we get smarter. There was a sector that we were not interested, but we are getting more interested. For example, buy now, pay later. every VC was interested in the space from the Middle East. I've talked to also almost everyone, if not everyone. We had our own thoughts why we were less keen, but now I can tell you we're a lot more keen on it. We have a huge thesis on SME lending. So we invest in a company called Lendo out of Saudi. We decided to lead a pre-seed round of another company in Egypt, which I cannot disclose now because we're literally closing anytime soon. But we have a big thesis on lending now, so we're sprinting on them.
Great. And so, what's your typical ticket size for investment?
So we generally write, let's say, $500,000 to $3 million is a fair game, just from the fund. But we normally want to write larger ticket size because we also bring our LPs. We have amazing LPs, strongest probably around the globe, including public companies to sovereign funds to families and individuals. Right. So $500,000 to $3 million minimum is a fair game for us.
Right. Okay. And so, obviously, I've seen and noted that you've grown your own fund. You started off in Dubai. I saw recently you've launched in Egypt. You're in Saudi Arabia. And what other markets are you? And when you are planning to go to these markets, what determines and what factors do you take into account to actually go and set up in these areas?
Yes. I'll tell you my secret sauce, and I don't want to invite like 1,000 1,000 people, but because you're a close friend. So we look at investment firm as a six separate functions, and one of the first function I call is setting up a presence. Second is sourcing. Third is investment slash DD. Fourth is the portfolio management, because as a founders partner, we spend a lot of time with portfolio management. Fifth is the fundraising. Sixth is on the exits. Okay. So number one, the setting up the presence. We believe that as an early stage VC, especially on the seed and pre-seed stage VC, we need to be extremely strong on a few core markets like Saudi, UAE, Egypt, Pakistan. So these are our core geography. Bahrain, Jordan, also very much focus for us. I will tell you, we have just closed the first investment in Bangladesh. So I'm already thinking 2 years down the road, when Shorooq, I want to be stronger in Bangladesh, I need to know the market. So I start to go and make trips to Bangladesh. I've been talking to many VCs in Bangladesh. Not so that I'm the strongest player today, but I know that in a year or two, I want to be the strongest player from the Middle East, anything related to Bangladesh, right? And I did that for Pakistan since 2017. Now we have already good companies, retail or airlift. We just announced that Digicata. We're also looking at so many, right? And I believe Shorooq, we are the leading player from the region who connect that corridor between Pakistan and the Middle East. So like now to respond to your question in a different way, we always think about what is the market size? Do I see a similar behavior from the Middle East or from Korea or the US that I saw? Bangladesh, 150 million population, Pakistan, 220 million population, uprising middle class. Do they speak English? Do they have a strong engineering talent? Right? Can I understand the market? Is the regulation safe? The inflow, outflow of capital structure, those things all matter to us. So it takes me good year and two to really learn about the market. And we have been doing that very well, right? We started with UAE, expanded to Saudi. Now we have office in Egypt, Bahrain, and soon launching one in Pakistan.
Excellent. So it takes you about 1 to 2 years to plan your market entry. And so along the way, I mean, obviously, I understand from the investment perspective, you're sizing out the market, whether it's going to be lucrative enough. But in terms of, again, and I'm talking from the perspective of any business, right? So whether you're a fund or whether you're any other type of company or an entrepreneur or anything else, the challenges are always around the legal and the compliance and the risk. How do you manage that?
So it's a great point. There's no right answer. First, you need to really understand what can you do and what is right and what we cannot do, right? Because for example, Pakistan is different from UAE, and UAE is different from Saudi. And also, to give you even more specific example, since we're so big on fintech is heavily regulated industry. Pakistan, Saudi, UAE are very different. So I really need to understand, if you're a mobile wallet in Pakistan, what different license can you get? Like if you're like a NIM card in UAE, what license do you need? If you're a NIM card in Saudi, what license do you need? So we really go and learn and also talk to the regulators. Sometimes we actually even help founders write white paper to change the regulators, or to give our views from the private market how that happens. And we have done that in UAE. We've also done that for Saudi. So like where we are absolutely confident is we want to make sure the entity we invest our precious capital, especially entrusted by our AOPs, they need to have an absolute bulletproof. Right? So I cannot, for example, normally we don't invest in an onshore entity of such an emerging market. We want to make sure we invest in the holdco, where it's an ADGM, it's ADGM, like a BVI, Cayman. So we want to make sure like we restructure before we make an investment so that
Yeah.
the flow of funds is bulletproof.
Okay, great. And so I guess then on the flip side, when you are investing in companies, growth is definitely on the mind, that you want to invest in companies that will grow rapidly. So typically, I mean, I think one of the most obvious things is companies seek investment for tech development, for marketing, for resources. What else do companies spend money on? What are the big budgets being spent on? So if you're investing, say, 3 million in a fund, what is that going to go towards?
Yes. So generally, it's really into big buckets is two. I can say three actually in our region. First is our talent, right? So salary like is always a big portion, especially in GCC countries like Saudi, UAE. Top talents are fortunately, unfortunately, very expensive. Like so it takes a lot of cost. And the second, this is where I personally do not like to invest, and this is more like my personal view and also Shorooq's view is on the marketing. Like our region, we are used to spending so much on marketing, and that I believe promotes the wrong behavior. I joke that any amount that I give to a founder and to a startup, they actually goes to Facebook and Google. That shouldn't be the case. So if you're a good company, healthy unit economics, healthy founder, healthy business model, strong repeat customers and recurring revenue, you don't need to spend too much money on marketing. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't spend at all, but you don't need to buy the customers, is what I mean, right? And so because I also come from PE background, etc., I care a lot about that fundamentally sound unit economics businesses, and this is why we do well with our investments. And lastly, in our region, I think there's a lot of capital that need to be spent to expand to new geography, like from UAE to Saudi, from Saudi to Egypt, from Egypt to Pakistan. These different geography expansion does take capital, sometimes in a form of inefficient use of capital. There's a capital reserve concept, right? For example, sometimes to expand to Saudi, you need to have a few $1 million sitting on the bank, right? That's not the good use of your capital, right? That's a working capital sink that you paid with your precious equity, right? With your dilution, but you cannot even use it, right? So sometimes we talk to the regulators, we talk to the founders. How can we optimize that? We're talking about millions of dollars, and for seed stage, early stage companies, they mean a lot, right? So like it's one of the bottlenecks that we have in the Middle East, and we're trying. I think we're really working hard to improve that.
Okay, great. And so I've seen a lot of companies, as I mean, obviously you're a Middle East based fund, so you kind of cover that region with between Middle East and Asia, I guess. Are there any plans to invest in startups in the UK or in Europe or in the US, anywhere like that?
So when we started Shuruk, because I went to Wharton and my partner Mahmoud went to Stanford, we actually have a few companies in the U.S. and they have been doing well, and we have been privileged with backing the right founders so far. But like Esma, the truth is, unless I believe that I have a strong competitive edge in UK, Europe, or US, probably it's not the right strategy for us. At the end, we're humble enough to understand I cannot win in every market. The world is too vast. No one can win in every market. So like for us, I know that when the European UK founder reach out to me, probably unless they have a very clear expansion strategy for the Middle East, then I actually believe I can add value. Probably we're not the right partners for their journey. then don't spend time with us, spend time with others who can actually create value for you in UK or create value for the US. I believe we can add more value for the US because we spent like the tens of years in the US. But in the Middle East, I can really help you so much in every single country, but probably not for UK. The
Yeah.
only times I've spent in UK was I was there for my Kaufman Fellowship 2 years ago. I've been to Piccadilly Square. I've been to many amazing places in London, but I don't know if I can really act like as your partner every day, right?
Okay, great. So we've only got a few minutes left, Shane. So just wondered, what's the ambition? What have you got planned for the next 5 years? Where do you want to be? Where are you going?
Asma, I will tell you, we have a 40-year vision. I want to build
40 years.
Blackstone
Wow.
KKR in the Middle East and Africa. Right. We want to build another Blackstone KKR from Pakistan, Bangladesh to Africa over the next 40 years. So that's why, although starting Shorooq at early stage, frankly, still early part of our life has not been easy, but we really have a big and ambitious goals. I know that if I work hard for the next still 38 years, I believe we can make it. So that's why I hope any listeners, any friends, they can follow us for the next 4 decades, right? We're gonna be here. Like I say, I'm gonna be the oldest Asian man standing in the Middle East, right? So I'm not
Brilliant.
joking. I hope you can follow us, right? We have a big goals, and we're not gonna give up.
I love the ambition. So, if people want to get in touch with you, Shane, or your fund, and want to seek investment, I mean, I know a lot of companies in the UK and Europe, particularly, they've got so many incentive programs in the UAE at the moment. They start up there, or they enter the market, and then they obviously seek investment funds locally. So that's a strategy quite often a lot of clients have used. How can people get in touch?
So honestly, my email is the best. I am very, very responsive in the email. I respond 100%.
I can vouch for that.
It might take a day or so. Where I struggle is LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I just get too much things that I cannot respond to every single thing. My email is SSHIN.
Don't
So
worry, I'll share that afterwards, Shane. I will share that with everybody. If people want to get in touch, they can let us know.
Yeah, please shoot a note to my email. Of course, we should be connected in LinkedIn, but if you, instead of a LinkedIn message, I am much, 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 much better in the email. So and I'll respond everything.
Wonderful.
Especially
thank you so much.
Asma, your network, will reach out, I'll respond.
I know you will. I know, absolutely. I really appreciate your time, Shane. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. And thank you very much for your time, and wishing you a wonderful week. And thank you again. I'll be in touch soon. Take care.
Thank you, Asma. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And we're back. Excellent. Thank you so much, Asma, for that amazing interview. And Siraj and Zain, welcome back to our first little segment of us having a chat.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know, Siraj, we moved you down to the other...
Sorry, just on Zain and your football top.
Yeah. It's coming home. I've got the top on for the Euros.
I know. A little bit of a teaser there into what we're about to discuss as well. But Siraj, we've sort of moved you down to the side there as a little bit of a test, hopefully to bring you in line with us a little bit. But yeah, I guess, guys, just to let you know a little bit more about this sort of next segment. Each week we want to sort of deep dive a little bit more into a topic that sort of is happening around the world, really, and get into how it affects companies and how it comes into business. So I guess without further ado, Zain, let's
Well, I mean, I think before we kind of go into it, I thought it'd be good to reflect on the interview we had.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, of course.
I mean, I think there were some great comments there from Shane. And one of the ones that stood out for me was the fact that, when Asma asked about the regions that he looks at and focuses on, he's saying you can't win in every market. Shane knows that their strengths are in the Middle East, North Africa, South Asia. So their focus is on that because they can add value to their portfolio companies within that region. And I think when you're kind of expanding internationally, from our perspective, you've got to be very careful when you go to which market and target it carefully, because you don't want to go too fast or into regions where maybe it isn't right for you. So having a clear focus, I thought that was a really good piece of advice.
Yeah.
Or not even advice, just the way that he does things.
Yeah, I guess it also touches as well to the point of, you need a tribe, not a single person. So as much as Shane could do an amazing job and, fill in a 3 million round ticket for you and so forth, that it's still about having the right people for the right markets. And I think that's where, obviously, hopefully a network comes into play, and knowing the right people for each step. Because obviously companies do succeed in the majority of markets. There's plenty of stories out there, whether it's Uber failing in different markets, Starbucks failing in Australia. There's plenty of cases where big brands don't win in every market, but there would be a way to win in those markets. They just took the wrong approach and probably needed to speak with the right people and have those right connections.
What stood out for me is how a lot of these kind of investments are thesis driven, and how much they kind of go in and understand an entire industry. It's not only looking at the due diligence of a particular company. They're very specific about going and saying, I understand the gaming industry. And I love the fact that the gaming industry is multifaceted as well. You know, I have a 22-year-old son who's a gamer, and I don't get it. But as I understand it a bit more, and you look at how big the industry is, that it's not only about the game, it's about the studio, it's about the publishing, it's about the everything else that spins around it. I think that's the really interesting part, and just how deep they dive into this thesis of any particular industry that they want to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. And then another thing that stood out for me was when Shane said they've looked at 2,000 companies and invested in 12. And my maths isn't that great, but I think that's 0.6%. So, you know, you've got to really have a good... I mean, the other thing he was saying interesting that feeds into our next section is he really looks at the unit economics. You know, have you got a good business model, good founder, repeat customers? And it's kind of, don't get the funding and spend it all on marketing straight to Facebook and Google. Yeah. So it's about that kind of strong business model.
Yeah.
But even having said that, marketing is still important. And we're going to be discussing marketing and advertising now, and how brands can leverage that on a global scale, internationally. And I have got my England shirt on, big match tonight. And I think in the news in the past couple of weeks, one of the biggest stories, strangely, was Cristiano Ronaldo moving a couple of Coke bottles. Yeah. And it made headlines everywhere, supposedly caused...
4 billion to come off the network. There we go. Ronaldo in 10 years.
Got it there.
Got it lined up. Yeah, so definitely just a bit of I think a coincidence. It was later proven that the Coke shares were already down 1% by the time he even took the stage, or the incident happened, which would have been 3 billion of the value there. The other 0.5%, you know, it's could have been happening anyway. But yeah, that was obviously the headline, that he wipes 4 billion off the value by moving a Coke bottle. So I mean, it'd be interesting, I guess, sort of jump in and think about how do companies position themselves? Because that was an old trusted working model, right? Brands would sponsor sports, and everybody just knew their part to play. But I guess with the rise of social media and people having their own branding, there's a lot more different assets, I guess, of what companies need to think about.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that's kind of muddied the waters in the past decade, maybe even 5 years, not even that long, is, you know, social media, Instagram. So I'm just going to give some stats on Ronaldo. He's got 500 million followers on social media. He gets $1 million per post that he puts on Instagram, where it's a sponsored post. I think last year he earned more, $14 million from Instagram, than his football salary with Juventus. So, I mean, the reason why that's important is you've got an individual who's got a personal brand and personal influence.
Personal beliefs.
Personal beliefs. So does that then clash on a global scale when a company is trying to market themselves? Because if it's an organization like UEFA with the Euros, they've got their relationships and, you know, the corporate sponsors. And as a brand, you're thinking, if I sponsor an event like this, I know there's millions of people watching. That's great awareness for me. But now, is it actually more value driven? I mean, Suraj, do you have any thoughts on the value aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm also been looking at this, and the fact, one of the reasons why he was so particular about that is that, you know, one of his biggest sponsors these days is Herbalife, and they've actually developed a drink, an energy drink, which is Herbalife CR7, which is pretty much his personal brand. So there's I also look back at Ronaldo and the fact that, you know, a couple of years ago he made a lot of money from Coca-Cola because he was in advertising. He did Coca-Cola advertising. he was endorsed, he did an advert for KFC, you know. So it's kind of, listen, let's be a little bit honest about what is health and what is about what's paying the check at the moment. And I think at the moment he's getting money from Herbalife, and therefore that was clashing with his actual bottom line. Or do we say, and I believe this seriously, in that he changed as well, and he changes. So he's developed, he's matured, he's become quite an activist in healthy living, but also in other kind of global issues as well. So part of me is going, listen, don't be a hypocrite. You made a lot of millions of Coca-Cola and KFC, and now you want to move it out the way. And the other half of me is going, yeah, we all change, we all develop, we all mature, and if he's in the place where he is right now. But let me throw it back to you and go, you know, the money that Coca-Cola's paying UEFA for the Euro sponsorship, that's filtering down to him anyway. I mean, what do you do with personal beliefs? Because the next person that did it was Paul Pogba, who doesn't drink alcohol, and he moved Heineken out the way. Will that influence the amount of money that's in sponsorship, and will it impact in the amount of money that can be paid to the players in the end?
Yeah, because I guess also, just to answer your question with the question, is who's responsible for that, right? So does Coke need to develop their global marketing campaign to take that into account? So whenever we're working with companies and they're expanding into new regions, you need to obviously take these factors, the cultural understandings and so forth, into account when you're looking at what's the market. Is my product going to fit into that market? And obviously this is on the level of, you're talking about Ronaldo having his personal brand being about healthiness and fitness, and that's been a big one in sports for people shifting away from Pepsi and so forth. So is that the right fit of, am I in a sports thing? Same works with the market, I guess. And should I be accounting for who the big people are, but am I sponsoring them or am I sponsoring UEFA? And then is it up to UEFA to ensure that those players, does their personal belief get a say in it? Obviously, it sounds impersonal to say you don't get a say in what's in front of you. It's UEFA putting you sort of there, but do they take that into account? And obviously, if it's someone with a lot less influence, they're just going to have to play the game, aren't they? But when you're a Ronaldo, you can kind of
I think
get away with it.
There's an old mantra that says when you're looking to market in new countries around the world, your first thought should be not to offend before it is to actually please and attract consumers. So I think the world has changed so much in terms of values, sustainability, thinking about the bigger picture, not just about commercial gain. And like you said earlier, Ben, traditionally it was a successful model, a big brand to sponsor a big tournament or something that's in the public eye. Whereas now I think it is going to be more, how can we align our values with the right fit? I mean, with the Coke scenario, Coke is such a big brand. There's zero nutrition from it. Everyone knows it's super unhealthy. Yeah, I will go and have a can with my dinner probably on the weekend. Coke is a great drink. But the point is, they're such a big brand, I don't think something like this is really going to harm them. But for other companies that are scaling, growing, entering new markets, I think the thought should always be, how can we align our brands, our company, with the right partner, the right sponsor, something that fits? So an unhealthy drink doesn't really fit with sport anymore. Although we just associate Coke with Coca-Cola. They do have a whole range of other drinks. In fact, the water that Ronaldo held up was actually also a Coke brand. So I think there's a lot of elements here to think about. And as a brand, you just need to make sure you align yourself with the right...
Is that Ronaldo calling you?
Coke's not very happy.
He wasn't happy with what I was saying, or with what you were saying, actually, about Herbalife and the billions.
I guess you also need to think about the longevity of that. I know the difficult thing is Coke isn't trying to sell itself as a healthy drink or anything when it's connecting itself to UEFA, so there's that element to take into account. The Coca-Cola's branding is never about we're a great taste, we're this kind of drink. If you go watch their ads, they might say great taste and zero sugar or whatever some of the ads might be, but the focus is always on the emotion behind it and the connection to different things in our life. So they're not there trying to say we're a healthy drink us while you play soccer. They're trying to associate, it's the UEFA, it's exciting, there's lots of things going on, drink it with the Coke on the weekend. So Yeah, I guess there's that to take into account as well. But what's going to be the future, and I think what's a good long-term partnership for your brand, for your company, and how will people associate it, is very important.
Yeah, and I
I
think
think they're entering the market, that Zane, what you mentioned about that, the nuances of entering a particular market is so important, because there's kind of anecdotal from my side, but there was a car brand called Seat, and as far as I know, that when they moved into South America, Seat actually means like a broken down car. Yeah, and I know that's so it's not going to work there, but that's just particularly when it comes down to the name. But I also know that within the Chinese market, certain colors, certain images are culturally mean certain things. And I have a good friend of mine who's the brand custodian of a big watch brand, and they literally, when they do global advertising, have to have a different execution for China, change the colors, make it specific for that, just because you don't want to offend.
yeah, China's such a big market. I think it's so unique that anyone who wants to go to China, you need to rethink everything, the branding, even the name. You've got to turn it into a Chinese name. There's a lot to think about, and I think we work with a few specialists in the China market. So if anyone is looking at that, that is a whole different ballgame. But I think this kind of feeds nicely into an example of a sponsorship that works really well. If we continue the sport theme and look at Formula One. So this 2021 season, every car has at least two tech company sponsors. Now, I think traditionally everyone knows, Formula One was kind of associated with tobacco companies, cigarettes, and there's a reason for that. And this kind of fits in with that natural partnership. And this comes down to value in kind deals. And I think that's very important. I think for any brand that's looking to grow internationally, if you can look at strategic kind of partnerships where there's a value in kind. So what does that mean in this scenario? So with F1, when you look at the cars today compared to before, they're essentially tech ecosystems, the whole car. They have IT, each team has an IT professional or a whole team of professionals tracking data, whether it's the driver's health, whether it's the tires, the whole system, every little millimeter, millisecond, everything matters. So if you look at, I think it's Oracle sponsors Red Bull, Darktrace sponsor McLaren. Darktrace is obviously a big UK success story, startup scaled rapidly. They just do the data side, not the actual car engineering. And because so much analytics is required by these cars and the teams, and these guys are providing it, it just makes a natural fit. Why don't, instead of you paying us, or maybe not pay us as much for these services, we want to sponsor you, we want to be featured on your cars. So automatically, Darktrace, I know they're very advanced, but UK startup, they managed to get their advertising onto F1 cars, global audience, traveling all over the world for the different Grand Prix, without actually paying for that sponsorship, because it's almost like a barter of services, value in kind. So I think that's a really good way for companies to look at not only leveraging partnerships, networks, people within your existing ecosystem, but to also align those values and avoid, some of these incidents like the Coke scenario.
Yeah, I think that it's the advertising form of collaboration, right? Is, by two brands connecting, they can both raise each other up and have overlapping audiences, essentially. So the potential for one audience is there for the other product. So that's why they advertise, and vice versa. So I think it definitely makes sense, because as much as it's also the tech elements within the cars, and which are crazy advanced. I think if you've ever seen one of the F1 steering wheels, it looks like the cockpit of an airplane with the amount of buttons and things they have going on in there. But also the audience for the F1 as well can be quite obviously a higher end audience. I think someone recently bagged Lewis Hamilton a little bit by calling F1 a billionaires boys club. So that might give you some indication of where they think the sport's sort of going. But you've also got to think about that side as well. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting.
When you're spending the kind of money when it comes to advertising that these guys are on Formula One or any sport, to get the best bang for your buck, try and get a brand alignment, like you were talking about the values. I mean, I remember back in the day when I used to play volleyball, beach volleyball, Benson and Hedges, the cigarette company, sponsored big international beach volleyball. All they were going for there was brand awareness, not brand association, because those two things just differed so vastly. Whereas I think, in marketing terms, there's something called the long tail effect of marketing. So you sponsor something big, like a big happening that happens, like a race, but it's how you use that brand association into multiple little iterations of exposure on social media, in a magazine ad, all the rest. And if your brand exposure is linked directly to what you're trying to get across, not just your name. So it's not only a name, but it's because Dark is a dark trace. They are a tech company. You can then kind of go, our tech makes you win, or anything else that can spin off that. I think that's where the real benefit is. And I think the tech's also becoming really clever, because more and more it's superimposing tech brands onto. We were talking about it off air a little bit earlier, where within football, the banner ads around the field, the guys at the field, when you can watch live sport again, will see a particular brand, but then the technology can now on sell brands into different countries, so that in South Africa, a local brand can look like they're sponsoring the Premier League, or having their brand out in the Premier League. So I think technology is going to kind of merge these two things where that we've spoken about today, Coca-Cola and superimposing the brand in the right places, and getting the alignment of your brand values with the sports values.
That's it. And I think it's definitely taking that deeper dive into what that association then plays. And like we said, as much as we're sponsoring UEFA, we're also in some way, are we sponsoring Ronaldo? And what are his personal beliefs, and how is that going to play into it? Because these individuals now also have, like you said, obviously a huge following and a lot of influence. So you have to start to take that into account as well. So whether or not there's a cross opportunity there, for as much as we're sponsoring UEFA on the whole, but we're also bringing in these individuals who will back that to another level.
Yeah, I think it kind of comes all the way back to networks, network effect. This is what we're here discussing, the value of a network. And when you sponsor a company, you start to build up a relationship with that company. You have those strategic partnerships, and the more your values align with your entire network, the more success there is for everybody. So the more you can associate yourselves with the right people, you have the right values, the right messaging, the right vision, collectively, you get those value in kind deals, you have more of an impact. So it makes more sense even to a viewer and a consumer at home. That goes together. So even with the F1 example, it doesn't matter if people know enough about it, but I don't know that much. But in the past 10 years, there was a lot of controversy about rule changes and has the sport lost its way. If you look at the tech partnerships now, essentially you're saying the best man in the best machine, that's who we want to see win. So it's a competition about the best tech and the best driver. And that's the essence of Formula One, not all the other stuff that was in the news over the past decade. So they've gone back to the root. So I think if you can bring your network together, associate with the right people, you collectively grow with the same vision, that's the best way to advertise on an international basis.
Yeah, exactly.
Werner said something quite funny on the chat in the live chat here. He says, if you want to make a small fortune in F1, you've got to start with a big fortune. It's an expensive sport, so yeah, it's quite apt.
Exactly. We probably won't have the network effect on any F1 cars yet, but maybe soon we'll have to go and start connecting with them and see how we go. Which car we're going to get on, we'll have to have a discussion. And then obviously we'll also make sure our personal Instagram accounts and all of our followers and so forth are on board as well.
Yeah. And before we end this segment, whilst we're on sport, it's coming home.
I hope we don't have any people from Denmark watching, because, good luck to you guys as well, I guess. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining the second episode of the Network Effect. We really appreciate having you guys here. Everyone that jumped into the chat, thank you so much for being a part of it as well. If you're joining a little bit late, we'll also obviously have this on demand up shortly as well, so you'll be able to catch us on YouTube and in podcast form if you're more of a listener, if you're lucky enough to have a commute at the moment. No, that sounds weird to say if you're lucky to have a commute. It's normally what everyone wants to get rid of, but I've had a small one by being able to pop back into the office and appreciate the podcasting time then. So please check us out on those platforms. And obviously each week at 2:00 on Wednesdays, we'll be back here. We've got another fantastic interview with Asma next week as well. And we'll again be bringing hopefully an interesting topic to discuss and to deep dive into, and obviously be looking forward to connecting with all of you in the chat and hopefully with everybody else as well. So thank you all so much for joining us. Zain, Suraj, thank you so much. Asma, who's off screen, thank you as well. And I guess we'll see you next week, Wednesday at 2 o'clock on LinkedIn.
See you next week.